Hey guys, this is Krantz with deucescrack.com. Welcome to LimeSlicer, my 10-20 no limit challenge. It's a three-part challenge in which I'll be playing 10-20 no limit across two tables and competing with White Lime to see who can win the most money over 500 hands. The interesting thing that I think about, and the reason we're doing a three-part series, is because I think that standalone static 1 hour videos are often not enough to explain to you sort of how to exploit tough regular opponents and how to pick up reads on them and how to use those reads to figure out what to do in close spots. It's one thing that I often see and that I often criticize for people for doing when they post hands on forums or when my students send me hands, and it's not giving a read. It's like, yeah, he's 25-17 tag, or crush and kill is 23-18 right here. But honestly, that's not necessarily enough, and that doesn't tell me what his three betting tendencies are like from the button. That doesn't tell me what kind of range of hands he'll three bet out of the blinds. That doesn't tell me how light he gets in four betting. And that doesn't take into account any of the metagame that I'm using to make my own decisions against them, whether or not I should be getting in with mid pair on a board that's two tone, things like that. How often I'm inducing bluff raises, how to alter my bet size based on past history, and I think over an hour you can't really get that. I can only develop reads based on my perception of all these guys and their image of Prinny Raid, but over 3 hours I'll be playing with them and they'll be getting to know my style, and I'll be able to hopefully help show you what it takes to outthink them. And that's something about my game that I think I do almost better than anyone in the world right now, is figuring out, putting them on a range of hands, weighting it rapidly, and figuring out how to out adjust them before they make their actual adjustment. So I'm hoping that with a three-part series like this, a lengthy session, 500 hands, I'm going to be able to show you some of those things. It looks like I played a bit with some of these people before. I've got a lot of hands on crush and kill. He looks like 23-18, kind of tough. And CM Glive looks kind of passive over, but it's not over a large number of hands. I don't know much about these other people, although She's No Good is somebody that I've seen around in the 10-20 game, so I assume that they're probably going to be a winning decent tag. Well, I don't know much about him right now. It is an enticing spot for a 4-bet because I know that he knows that I'd be isolating Sammy, which is generally going to be somewhat fishy when he limps. He knows that I'm going to be isolating Sammy with a wide range of hands, so he can 3-bet profitably with much of them. But honestly, I just don't know that much about his 3-betting range, and I don't remember that much about him, even though I play these many hands. So I'm just going to give this to him here, give him the benefit of the doubt. Here I get min raise, and I just don't think I have any fold equity over a limper when he makes a min raise here. He's either bluffing or he has a hand that he's felting. He's never raising an 8 or a queen and not calling it off, so I just really don't think he's bluffing that much, which is why I'm going to fold. I'm going to be, for the challenge's sake, I'm going to be probably moving off this table and moving another one in, just simply because I want to put myself in the spot to win as much money as possible over these 500 hands to beat a meal. So if you see my this pop up, table pop up, excuse me for that, I'm just trying to evaluate what good tables would be to play. Bring some game selection into this. So I'm gonna uncheck auto post and bring in a different table if I can find one. I think I'm gonna. No, there's a short stack there. It's funny. Karosh is a short stacker, and not hating on Karosh, but he was one of my past students. So I must have failed someone in explaining how to play full stack no limit properly if he's uh, taking a short stacking. I think I found a pretty good one with two players I haven't seen before in position on crush and kill, so I'm gonna move that one in. So here I'm gonna make a standard C bet because the board is dry, and I don't anticipate ever getting bluff raised here, simply because I raise under the gun, and there is no history between us right now. If he does raise, I would assume that he's slow playing an overpair. He flopped a set. Well, his most likely hand here is a 10 or a pocket pair, and I'm going, or some sort of weak ace. So I'm going to bet again and try and barrel him off. When I don't know, when I know that my opponent is generally not going to be that strong, I'm going to barrel more often than I'm going to just check fold, primarily because betting just is cultivating an aggressive image. Here's an interesting spot. I think I'm going to value bet, to be honest, because right now I put him on a 10 or pocket 5s, 3s, or 7s. He could be slow playing a set, but I really feel like this is a good spot to value bet against him. He could definitely have a 10, and I end up getting kind of owned here, but given the board texture and the fact that the draw is missed and the fact that I have a very, very aggressive image, this is thin, but I think it's good enough. And if you're ever wondering, well, if it's going to be really thin, should I do it or not? Generally, if you just sat down at a table and you're looking to exploit your opponents and you've got a thin bet early on before you've got a clear value bet, you're going to want to make the thin bet because it's going to, in their mind, it's going to look like you're trying to run them over. And even though they may call it the better hand or they might just fold then, well, it sets them up to be more likely to think that you're bluffing in the future, in which case, in the future, hopefully you'll have a big hand and they'll call you down. So I think it's going to be a perfect spot now. The next time, like I have aces in that spot or I flop a set, he's going to be way more prone to call me down because I showed him 3 barrels right off the bat. So I think that's a line that not too many people think about. You know, the value of that third barrel bet, even if it's razor thin. I never it wasn't a bluff because I never expect him to fold a 10 there. But I think it's definitely profitable given metagame issues, which are something that, like I said, are going to be what I'm trying to focus on throughout this session, throughout this challenge. So I don't know much about Sammy32 other than he limped, so I'm going to remember that. And this guy, I101, it seems sort of like a fish name. I don't know why, but some of the most profitable heads-up sessions I've ever had are against names like this. I don't even remember any of them. I know that I know that they were some combination of letters and numbers. So I think that that this guy is going to be somebody that I can exploit in that way. Hajaga, never seen him before on this table, and the other guy is two tabling here. So I'm going to repop crush and kill because I position on the left table. So I'm going to want to use position very, very aggressively, and he just shoves all in. So, I mean, already it seems like he's frustrated. That can't be a good play with anything unless he's bluffing, and I don't think he is. It just seems that he's frustrated against my 3-bet. I think that I would call with any pocket pair there, and I would call with ace queen or better. Tempted to 3-bet him again right out of the gate, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. Not sure much about how aggressive he is, but that's something I really like to do against a regular that I'm going to try to take advantage of and try to pound on and create a lot of pressure. A lot of regular players are used to essentially reading a textbook. Three bet these hands against these type of players, and the better regulars at these limits are a bit more creative than that, but and they understand what their image is like and how to play post flop in those sort of spots, and they realize that well it might not be a good time to three bet, but generally most players are just gonna three bet a or I mean raise a certain range of hands and just fold and four bet if they get three bet with X, Y, and Z, but with the rest of the alphabet as far as hands, they're just gonna fold them. There we go. He's isolating with ace eight, and I think he barreled there if I was paying attention. So this guy's super aggressive. So getting back to what I was talking about, something I like to do to sort of put these regular players out of their element is re-raise them completely relentlessly, and then switch gears and tighten up because they're not used to dealing with someone who re-raises them constantly, and they don't know how to play out of position against that. And if they're not gonna be comfortable four betting the hell out of me with all sorts of hands, which is the most effective counter strategy to me out of position, then they are just absolutely doomed. And I'm very familiar with how to pound on those type of players and how to in the right moments at which that I should be tightening up because when I tighten up, they're about ready to snap. It's their tipping point, if you will. And at that point, I know more or less when I should be re-raising the top range of my hands and when it's going to be very evident that I'm going to get paid off with them. So I think against Crush and Kill, I mean, I think he's already almost at the tipping point, I want to say, in that against me. And I would attribute that honestly to the fact that he sees printing rate and he must, he realizes that I play higher stakes and he knows how aggressive I am and he's just going to not give me any credit right off the bat. So that means that I'm probably just going to be playing tighter against him. I'll still be popping him in position just to keep that paranoia in his brain, but for the most part, I'm going to be a little bit tighter against him. If this table on the right gets bad, I've got another one ready to come in where I'm on the right of Crush and Kill also, and there's looks like two fishy players at the table. That's something I don't do enough. That I really advocate, but I don't necessarily preach enough. It's not necessarily much of a concern anymore when because I'm playing really high stakes games and obviously I'm game selecting very well, but those games don't run as often. But I'll hear I'm gonna bet just because I think I have the best hand. I have top pair and he'll call me with worse. But when I'm playing the lower stakes, I think I should be more actively looking for the best games to play. It doesn't really require that much effort, and it translates to a much easier session and a much bigger return as far as win rate. Ace during the cutoff, I don't generally like opening that, so I'm just gonna muck. Even though Crush and Kill folded and the players behind me probably aren't that aggressive, I'm just gonna muck there. Ace Jack, I'll continue bet, although I do think I'm gonna get called a lot here by pocket pairs. Given that I've been betting before, I think I'm just gonna concede this one to him. I don't really expect that I'm completely floated by this guy. I think he'd give me a little more respect than that. But it's interesting that he bets this turn. I mean, I think, I don't know enough about him to think that he's incapable of doing this with a 10, so I'm going to fold. Typically, though, I see that turn go check check a lot because he's got some sort of pocket pair. I mean, he could have had nines, in which case he turned a boat, or he could have slow played a trip sevens on the flop, specifically because I barreled him last time. So that makes him a little bit more likely to slow play if I assume he's capable of thinking like that. Which again, I'm not sure yet, but I think these are some of the things that I'm thinking about in developing my overall analysis of him. I hope that maybe 45 minutes from now, if we're still on the same table, I have a much, much, much more focused, clearer read on him. As you can see, I'm not making these notes on him right now. I'm keeping them in my head mentally. But if I see something very, very notable, I'm gonna definitely put it down and file it. Uh, on the subject of notes, I'm not necessarily going to be making notes on hands that he played against other players. Like he barreled this guy before with just ace high, because the way he plays other players is not necessarily going to be the way he plays me. Especially because I'm going to be way, way more aggressive than other players. Oh wow, somebody's up against a boat there. Yeah, that's obvious. If he had a straight, that's just like a terrible call. I call with Jack 8. That is just absolutely atrocious. This player is just like phenomenally bad. That tells me. He might be tilting. I just that's an obvious boat, and the fact that he didn't even. I mean, I would fold a straight there. The fact that he didn't even fold, didn't even have a straight. That's just like completely awful, awful, awful. And I'll note in my head that this guy slow plays. So Sammy raises. He's been limping before. I'm just gonna call on the button with this, and I think my implied odds are pretty good against somebody who I don't have stats on yet, but who I assume is tighter than most, simply because he's limping a bunch of hands. Here's a spot where I would not raise with this hand because I don't think I have any fold equity, but I will definitely bet when check 2. I don't really expect him to check fold, but I also don't expect him to check raise. And if he does call, I can barrel him off, or I can build a pot for when I hit my 8 outs, and I have backdoor flush outs too. I would be surprised if I got check raised. So that's a bad turn if he has something like king king, which is definitely in his range, and he's not going to fold an ace that he checked on the flop. So he leads. I've just odds to draw for the straight, so I'm going to call. I don't think I have any fold equity by raising. I think he's almost definitely on at least a big ace here. And he could have a set of kings. He could also have a set of aces or a flop set of tens and play like that. It's interesting that he checks here, but there's no way I'm ever going to get him to fold, except with maybe an overbet, and I don't even think that'll happen. I would say he has. I mean, he's got to have the top end of his range is either aces or kings here. Although I'd expect him to continue betting with kings because it's likely to have an ace. So he's got either got aces, ace jack, or ace queen. King queen. That's interesting. I just never thought he would have that. Get check calling the flop. That's something to mentally note. He's a bad player. I just did not ever put him on that. That's fun. That's fun. That's even better. That was a fun little hand there on the left. So yeah, my notes are always going to feature what they did in response to what I did. So this guy barreled me. I had re-raised him lots of hands prior, and so on. It's not just going to be narrating the action of the hand, unless it's very, very, very telling. So for instance, I'll probably make a note, don't run, I think this is a good note, don't run big bluff against him, because he wasn't even able to fold. It was one pair on a 4 straight paired board, or 2 pair against this guy. And I don't know what kind of image this guy has, but even so, that is just not good against nearly anyone. I don't care how maniacal your image is. This is just a terrible board to see bet against two players, especially one who's not going to be giving me much credit. I have to say one part of my game that I am interested in improving if I ever need to break down my game on a more technical level is play against short stacks, because not necessarily because I don't know what the right thing to do is with X, Y, and Z hands against their shoves and their raises, but because I am interested in the mentality that they have, what hands they raise against which players, and how they see the other, what their poker vision is like for everyone else at the table. I think that make an interesting case study, I guess. Making sure I keep myself on the wait list for a bunch of tables, just make sure that um, I have the best tables. Looks like there's a great table that I'm on the wait list for. It's Larson. The reason I know that is because the player D Moogle, he's a 2+2, or I know he's moving up, taking shots at 10-20 no limit, and he's only on the absolute best tables I can call here for set odds. So I will. Just to elaborate, the D Moogle, he's always on the best tables. So oops. Oh, there I am on his table. I'll get on that in a second. Um, so that means there's generally going to be some sort of fish. This guy fires 385. I'm going to peel one. I think that's generally standard because he'll be firing overcards enough, and I have a pocket pair. Wow. Very interesting that he just open jams the turn. I don't know much about him, but this is an ugly spot to stack off, although there are two flush draws on the board. I think the only hands he's firing are queens, kings, or aces, and the rest I'm ahead of, which would be the double flush draws. The overbet jam is just interesting. I don't see that out of bad players unless I mean he could have aces. I'll give him that. I think I'm gonna look him up here. I generally see if they have a hand like aces, queens, or kings, they're gonna bet 800 and I can easily fold. But the overbet jam sometimes confuses me. Yeah, just a complete bluff there. Especially from what I labeled a bad player. So you kind of look stupid when that doesn't work out, but years and years of trusting my read kind of come in handy in spots like that. I didn't expect to see that, although I know it's part of his range, and I would have looked fantastic on video if I was able to put him on a hand like that. It's a small part of his range, definitely, but it's there. Just pure overcards, especially since my hand looks pretty weak to him. I think when I'm playing lesser tables, fewer tables, I'm able to make plays like that more effectively. Primarily because my senses are just so much more fine-tuned. So here's a spot. If I were in the big blind, I would call. Just because I would love to play pot with him if he's potentially tilting, and if I hit anything, I definitely have implied odds to stack him. But with Karosh, I'm not sure how to say it in the blinds here, I don't necessarily like it because he can easily shove and take off the dead money. Here I'm gonna bet, which is interesting. I think kind of interesting because if he checked back eights, nines, or even a 10 on the flop, I can move him off it because generally a hand that I give up with is ace X on that board sometimes. Here I'm just gonna check back. I either have the best hand or he's not folding, and I'm never ever going to be able to multi-street bluff on a board like this simply because his range is just composed when he check calls that flop is just composed of so many hands like 5-7 just pairing gut shots or pairing open enders that it's really not a winning proposition to try to move him off a hand like that, especially somebody who I've never seen before who could just very well be not a good player. And secondly, because it's often hard to tell whether or not maybe they have a baby two pair and they're not putting in action with it, and you're never ever going to get them to fold that. So it's just not easy enough to move them off a hand. So I just don't even start the bluff. I like to take about as long as possible in every decision against short stacks just to tilt them. If I'm gonna call, I'll slow roll the hell out of them with aces and ace king and things like that. And even if I'm gonna fold, I'm just gonna make the action. I'm not gonna waste my time bank, but I'm just gonna make the action last forever to piss them off. So I'm actually gonna get off this top right table and start playing uh, the one that D Moogle is on. Even though Sammy's a fish, I think this table is certainly going to be better. I missed my sit in there. Oops. That's no fun. I think the Greek, well, these two are definitely the marks, and of course Shoplik, but the Greek is probably the one because he's not across any other tables, and he's not across any other tables. So generally, one tabling players are not going to be very good. Raise in position, just completely pound on my opponent. Deep stacked. I'm not going to try and move him off a pair on this board. I've got outs to a 9 or 7. Put him on like ace 5 here. Ace 3 is pinning with a gut shot. Something like that. I'm just never going to get him off that. I might get him off it on the turn, but his range is more centered on pocket pairs. Not pocket pairs, one pair hands. Cool thing about short stacks is when they double up, they leave. So I'm hoping that a full stack player will come and sit. Especially if he wants a place at this table, being to my left would be the absolute ideal spot. I'm gonna bet here. We are deep, and seeing that he was peeling with gut shot type hands on the other board makes me want to bet. I almost want to value bet against ace high. I just don't think he'll call it. I do expect to win this hand though, more often than not. Well, there's a better table with D Mughal also. Yeah, he had a club flush draw. Hmm. Well, now I'm at the interesting juncture of having three good tables and being unsure of which two to play. This guy Shop Leak is on both. He's a massive fish. He looks like he's 52-18 or something of the sort, and he's from Russia. But other than that, there aren't too many great players at the table, so it looks like I'm going to sit out on that table and just keep myself there in case any of these top tables get worse. This guy Apple's 32. He's been opening over 18 hands. He's 50-30, so he's going to be just a terrible player playing with a $500 stack. You know they're not professional short stackers when they don't sit in for proper amount of big bets. Knowing this guy's 3-betting range, I think this is a great spot to 4-bet, but he almost is liable to tilt shove any two hands that he has, so I'm going to give that to him. I would 4-bet most hands I'm going to that I don't want to play post flop in position, but I may slow play hands like aces through queens there simply because of his aggression in the rear spot we played before. I just do not expect this guy to ever give up against me. Now, that's an adjustment that I'd be making against other players. If they call me with pocket sixes and I know they're thinking player, I'm generally not going to be showing up there with total air unless I think that they believe that the next time I jam, I'm doing it because I did it before we're there. So now I can actually get them to outthink themselves. But for the most part, if they call me with pocket sixes, I'm just not going to assume they're going to fold. Here I'll bet once and typically give up just because the board texture isn't great. I'm going to check to induce here. Assuming against this guy who's likely a fish, he might bet. I don't know what he has here. Definitely it's floating though, so I'd put him on two pair or potentially a straight or something like that. I think if he had a showdownable hand that isn't big, he'd be checking back because he doesn't want to open himself up to a check raise. I would check raise that turn with a probably two pair or better some of the time and a big draw some of the time just to mix up my check raising frequencies. But I think it's a player like D Mughal. I'm just assuming is not going to play me too aggressively. I'm going to check. If I check, it's going to get checked back more often than not. So I'd probably be betting like 85% of the time I have a hand that I want to continue with against him, whether it's a draw or like a semi-bluffing type hand or a big hand, just because I don't want him to check back. It's not a bad thing if he checks back with a draw, but I'd rather bet and try to get him to fold, obviously. Tough spot to think about is what happens if I did have a spade draw there against D Mughal. I barreled the turn and he called again in the river blank to shove. I think in this day and age, he's way more apt to I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger simply because we're deep. In this day and age, he's way more likely to call because the draw bricked and because people are better hand readers than back back in a few years ago when players were just less apt to do that. Players were just less apt to do that because they're not showing up with kings often. They have tens more and they think that they're just not as good at reading thinking about in terms of, for lack of a better word at this point, thinking about hands in terms of G bucks, weighting ranges, and mathematically calculating out of hand, outside of their session, how well they fare against uh, what my value and bluff shoving range is there. So, in essence, unless I have a good reason to think that he's going to fold a pair, I just won't in that spot. But if I rivered an ace, I'd definitely shove, and if I rivered a queen, I might even too. Although against a tight player like that, I just assume that he mucks a 10 on the turn more often than he calls with it. Despite being tight, he's still opening 14% of his hands, so this is a good spot to 3-bet with Queen King. It's better than calling. And now it's actually awesome that I get to 3-bet him here too. And I actually have big hands on both tables. This is something cool that doesn't come up. It comes up now and then, but doesn't come up that often. Just gonna make the same exact c-bet on both. I'd be happy to get all in on both tables. Despite being tight, this is actually a worse spot to get all in obviously than this one. Simply because he's under the gun and called a re-raise. So if I get check raise here, I'm not exactly completely thrilled, but I do have to call because I have top pair, top kicker in 2007. And here, I think I'm going to jam. Even though 9's decent part of his range, and he might slow play a set. He could have 10s or jacks, and my image is insanely aggressive. Oh, there's 9's. So win a stack, lose a stack, nice. Could have checked there. But given the fact that I may have messed up that hand. I could have checked there, but I think given the fact that my image is so aggressive and the fact that he just lost a stack on the other table, shoving is probably slightly better. I may have misplayed that though. I probably could have checked and folded to a river bet and bet when he checked. Something to keep in mind next time. I don't play every hand perfectly. I do play them aggressively though, so that is it's better to be aggressive than passive. So, great, more good things like winning stacks and tilting people, and getting called by hands that you just didn't think were ever capable of calling you come out of being an aggressive player than they do out of becoming a passive player and hoping people will bluff you. So looks like we've got a good game going here. Gel Syncrews from Australia, don't know much about him, but these sort of names also seem kind of fishy, even though I don't have much backup for them. But if you say them, Hajaga and Gel Syncrew, those are not names that command much fear. Yeah, I think I'm gonna look over that hand in the Poker Tracker review against him, but I do think I misplayed it simply because he could be slow playing a set, and I can't be sure that he's gonna stack off with a worse hand. You know, he may fold tens and jacks. He could have queen jack suited also, but I have a queen, so it's less likely. But he may fold 10 jacks, and if he is folding those hands, or if he's not calling them as often as possible, I'd be interested to look in the math at that at the math in that play against his range of calling hands, and seeing how likely he is to call with tens or jacks. But off the top of my head, I do think it was not the right play, and I actually overestimated my image there. So I'm just gonna bet once against this guy, hoping he'll fold his suited aces that missed or his pocket pairs. And now, given the fact that on the other table I had him reading as just a big fishy calling station, I'm just gonna completely give up. I don't ever expect him to fold that on any street, regardless of how the board comes. So I will play a bit. I'll play my strong hands fast in my weekends. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Angry, angry, angry. I messed up that queen king hand because I'm gonna need to play the rest of the session out mistake free and avoid suckouts if I want to avoid wearing a Chipotle red pepper costume into the Chipotle, which is and if any of you don't have Chipotle, you're missing out on amazing, amazing burritos. I have to wear that in there, and there are a lot of young kids in my area, and I'm just gonna look like a complete retard ordering a burrito. But if I have to, I have to. I actually think it'll be way better than getting pied in the face, uh, which we filmed the pieing segment in my room, and my floor still is sticky and smells like cake and pie. So at least I'll get an awesome burrito out of it. But that is not the mentality I want. All right, come on, Jay. Stop psyching yourself out and get back into this. I'm up about 2,500 right now, over 140 hands, and I am at some great tables, deep with a bad player over here. So I think that you gotta go at him with a winning mentality. Eye of the tiger, baby, right? I'm in this absolutely to win. And what happened here? He bet $60, which is hilarious. So yeah, this guy's definitely a fish. Bet $60 on the river when he has a flush. So on another table that I'm watching, Crush and Kill. Oops, that's not the hand. I think this is pretty standard against aggressive opponents, although D Moogle, I think, is tighter than he thinks. So D Moogle opened in the cutoff, I believe, four-handed with Ace King. Crush and Kill made it 270, which is standard. D Moogle made it 645, and he shoved all in. So yeah, with the four betting wars that are going on lately, Ace Queen of Clubs seems like a no-brainer all in against people's four betting ranges, but you have to be be sure. I'm gonna call this for 20 more, just because I can. For 20 more, I'm willing to play a pot with this guy. So you need to be sure, like, just because you're being aggressive, do not overvalue your image, which I did before. But pre-flop, do not think that this guy is gonna four bet bluff you, even though you're four betting, even though you're three betting a ton. Do not think that, because a lot of the time they're going to show up with the goods. They're just going to wait, 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 and they're going to have a big hand and show up with the goods. So pay attention to what people's four betting ranges are. There are players that have played with it four bet like crazy, so I'll just three bet hands that I'm gonna five bet all in with. And there are other players who just I've made many mistakes by four betting all in light, and I've probably lost more money than anywhere else five bet bluffing against players. Uh, which sounds ridiculous when you say I'm actually gonna call here rather than shut everyone else out. I'll let them in with jacks, and if they fold, I'll be able to call it off on any flop when he bets or shove over any bet. But yeah, I've lost more money five bet bluffing than in any other spot. Um, just because I think that paranoia gets the best of me. I've finally gotten that out of my system, but like when I was grinding 5-10 and 10-20 and 3-6 early in 2007, I would spew off a lot. And the great thing is that if you're aware that you're spewing and you look over your hands in poker tracker, you review your play, and you're aware of it. If you lose a stack, it's often not translated to direct. Say you're playing 3-6, it's not translated to direct $600 or direct 100 big bets worth of spew, because people do take notice of how much you're spewing. And generally, if you're five betting all in, no one is ever going to four bet. If you're five bet bluffing all in, and they see this, no one is ever going to four bet you light. So you're at least making the game play somewhat face up. So here I'm going to call from the small blind because we're so deep, and I'm not going to really fold any two to a min raise being this deep. Gives him a good opportunity to squeeze with nothing, but I'll just give it to him if he does. Maybe maybe I'm uh maybe I'm underestimating um D Mughal. Yeah, he's probably a competent player. I know he's a 2+2, uh, but I think he's gonna show up more often than not with the goods in big pots. Pre-flop is one thing, post-flop is another. All right, so that's it for LimeSlicer episode 2. Hopefully you guys enjoyed what we have in store, and you'll come back and see how things continue next week with episode 3. This is Krantz with deucescrack.com. Live long and prosper.